Welcome back to What Problem Are You Solving? Where we're going to figure out which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Hey, John, why do you sound like you're in a can somewhere?
In a can. I'm traveling. I'm always on the road, ready to go, and not in showdown. So let's keep this show on the road.
Consummate professional, Adam. He is the consummate professional.
Adjusted by Swatch. I'm ready for a new time zone.
Bam.
Wouldn't miss it. Wouldn't miss it.
Hey, and do you have a smartwatch?
I do.
That means your smartwatch is anchored to your phone, which means it already does the translation like when you show up. Hey, did you know that your phone is hooked up to a series of satellites? Did you know that? That's how it knows what time and where you're at.
It's amazing.
And did you know that those satellites are accurate to like 10 to the minus 11 or 12?
I do now.
Okay. All right. I'm done. I don't have any more stupid facts.
You're on fire tonight. I love it.
Yes, you do.
I got some sleep last night. I slept for almost 8 hours.
We can tell.
Someone give him some downers quick. Adam, what problem are you solving?
I want to be at rally in the morning. I can't really. It's too close to fly. I want like an Uber, but it's like a bed, but it's like a tiny home that I just like get into tonight. And it's like a hotel but it's like a micro, those micro hotels in Japan.
Hotel on wheels, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to wake up. I'll miss the morning. I'll miss Jen, our favorite, tied for first favorite guest on this show. But again, I think I wasn't feeling great last week. But Midwest House, I think we plugged that rally. Good ecosystem conference. Yeah, I couldn't get down there tonight, but I don't want to. It's 5 hours, but even if I flew, I still wouldn't get down there till 10, 11, 12 o'clock. So, yeah, I wish there was. Let's utilize this downtime in the middle of the night. I don't need to go fast, so speed is not the value proposition.
Not at all.
And I actually don't want to be there in 5 hours. I want to be there in like 9 hours, so I can sleep.
So they invented trains just yesterday.
Yep.
That you can sleep on.
It's the closest. I mean, listen, not all new things are.
They don't need to be innovative.
Or reinventing of the wheel, yeah. But it would have to leave from my house, and then
Yeah.
And there's no train. And there's no train to Indianapolis. I checked. I would have taken the overnight train.
Go.
Yeah. If there was, but
all right.
Now with all
there is a pain point. Got it.
Wait a minute. Have you seen the one? They got the buses that you can actually sleep on now. They're in California, at least. Yeah,
something like that. I
like you can like lay flat and get a nap. I'm like a real like.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
All right, there. That is a problem that needs to be solved. Sign me up. Ty, what problem are you solving this week?
Trying to figure out how not to make sure. Man, that is some jacked up English. Trying to make sure I don't have conjunctivitis and it's just allergies. So, if I can figure that out and figure out which allergy pill makes my eyes not itch. So that's my personal one. My other personal one is trying to figure out what I'm going to be doing, what I'm going to be wearing for the family reunion masquerade ball. It's supposed to be a mask, only as you can see, I wear glasses and I can't wear contacts, or the contacts don't like me. So I'll be pretty stupid, like putting the mask on, or putting the mask on over top of my glasses. It's going to be bad. So that's a problem to be solved. Maybe not.
You're not wearing the mask now? Okay, just check.
Ha ha, very funny. Ha ha, it is to laugh. Professional, trying to figure out what my next move is. I have two things that are on the horizon. One is and they're both tied to science and entrepreneurship. So we'll see. Hopefully one of the two will pop very soon.
Funny you say that, because the job searching market is really upside down right now, especially since COVID. And there was about 3 or 4 months that I was in between jobs a couple years ago, post COVID, and oh man, the whole market is so backwards because right there's the supply and demand is off. And there's lots of articles that have been written about this where um, employers are just putting permanent openings out, even if they don't intend to fill them. Just leave the listing up, and it creates this offset of a market because hundreds of people apply for them, and either the position never closes or it closes, they never fill it, and they just reopen it. And so the signal to the market is way off, and it's a whole completely upside down thing. And the problem is you do have things like Glassdoor that can kind of rate employers, but it's usually filled by people who had a bad experience, and so it's very rarely a good system. But there really needs to be almost like an eBay buyer seller rating system that you could trash employers that say, hey, I've applied and I got no feedback. They never called me, they never sent me a form letter. This same position has been open, and so you need somebody to get that signal back. So anyway, that's something I've thought about for months, of what's wrong with the imbalance of these online job postings. So
it's interesting because do you remember the book that you and I explored called Who Gets What and Why by Alan
Yes.
Roth, where he was looking at marginalities
Yes.
and not marginality, markets, thin and thick markets, lots of opportunity, very thin, and a whole bunch of stuff going on, or very thick markets where you have high cost but very few opportunities. So like Tesla is a thick market. Back in the day, it's hugely expensive. But there you go. That's that book. Hugely expensive to buy the car, but if you got one, the margins on it, the margins on the market were really, really big. But if you had a Pinto, you had a smattering of Pintos. I got one for you all. You both probably are old enough to remember. Remember Yugos? You remember Yugos? Yeah, this shit car. Excuse me. Right? They cost like $15, and there were a bunch of them. And if you wrecked it, you're like, okay, go buy another one, right? And so the margin on the market was very thin, but it was spread across everywhere. I think in the book he talks about TGI Fridays versus a 5-star restaurant, right? Mm-hmm. And it sounds to me like you're speaking to who gets access and why and how they've manipulated the market. Right. So it looks like they're active, but they're not taking anybody.
Correct. Exactly.
And so how do you manage that market so you can get, as a job seeker, I actually understand whether or not it's even worth my time to even apply them, because they just keep rolling it and just keep attracting people. And every once in a while, they may pull that one person, right? They might pull one person out of 10,000. Exactly. They never close it, so it just keeps going. So it's a very thick market.
And it's a broken incentive structure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'd be fun. We should talk about that more in our multi-sided market episode.
Ooh.
Well, when you guys are up to that, just the same exact thing is happening with VC, so you got to just solve that as well.
Say more real quick, and then we'll get to John's problem. I'm curious about that.
I mean, VCs that say they write angel, they say they write this type of check. They don't say they invest in this type of vertical, this type of founder. They don't necessarily. This is not the trash the VC hour, but
it happens.
But 100%, they're the same exact protocol that you're describing happens with VC, and until there's a reporting mechanism that like I did not get feedback, or like go fix this thing. I've written about this a tiny bit, like go fix this thing and come back to us, and founders fix that exact thing, but still they get ghosted.
Wow.
No referrals to other places in the market, which you can sort of understand the scarcity mindset there. But at the very least, not ghosting people and giving them feedback and telling them that they passed, when it's okay, like to reach back out again, who they did write, are they writing checks to anyone? Some websites purport to report on that stuff, but it's not as easy to find as it should.
I'm working with a person. I don't work with her often, who is exploring that same problem. And she's like, "Hey, go find traction." Yep, she's like winning everything as far as the accelerators. 30K here, 30K there. She goes to the VC market. They're like, "Yeah, go prove out that she's still doing it." Okay, she goes out and she proves it. Yeah, go. And notwithstanding the amount of money going to Black and brown founders, particularly Black and brown women founders, is already small, and she keeps going. And again, it's not just non POC VC, right? It is POC VC that are doing the same thing. It's like,
Wow.
What am I supposed to be? You keep saying, go chase there, and I go chase there, and it's not there. I'm like, didn't you just tell me to go right? Yeah, well, actually, it was actually over there. And so it's kind of wacky, man.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and to your point, John, there's no, and I think part of this gets to what we're talking about tonight: hypothesis, assumptions, right? There's no mechanism, and I think what you're laying out tonight, John, is the hypothesis is that there should be, that if there were a reporting mechanism for these kinds of behaviors, that it would drive a better response in the market, so we would get a better balance in the market for whatever.
Exactly. Yep. Something's broken. There's the curse of knowledge. Cool.
So, John, what problem are you solving? Man, we done broke 11 minutes already. We haven't even gotten to you.
This is good. I love these little tangents. So let's see. So I'm in town, and as an agile coach, I'm trying to herd about 50 to 100 cats in the same direction, right? Doing this big room quarterly scaled agile implementation, and the challenge that I have, the opportunity that I have, is that while the teams, the developers, kind of know specifically the technical stuff they need to work on, the stakeholders have very squishy roles. Their BART is broken. We'll go back to talk about the BART episode. Their boundaries, authorities, roles, and tasks are broken because there's a lot of people that are involved but not responsible. And so trying to get that single decision or decisions made from people who want to contribute but don't necessarily want to be held accountable for the decisions to be made. So that's a little bit of offset of the market there too. So it'll be a fun couple of days planning together and trying to make sure that we're all pointed in the right direction by the end of the week.
All right, since you said BART is broken, and since our topic tonight is, it's not easy, but it's straightforward.
Sure.
So we'll have time to go next level on assumptions mapping and assumptions and hypotheses. My BART is broken. Ty, can you pull up that post, or can you send it over to John? That post that went mini viral this after. I don't know if it was just my LinkedIn or maybe it's just because Boris and Ty in my feed, and Sam.
I was just thinking about that.
And so I couldn't understand what was going on there. And obviously they struck a nerve with a bunch of people, and I agree with the content seemed good, but it was
sending it now, John. It's interesting, and you have to, when you get it, John, pull up the picture.
Roger that.
Copy link to post.
Picture was good. The content was very smart. Whenever I see Ty, Sam, and Boris all jumping, I'm like, all right, now I've got something to look at, and something that I didn't know what truly cost 5 billion comments on that thing.
Okay.
Do you see it?
Accountability chart.
Yeah, that right there. This is interesting because I said, oh, this is kind of cool. And the reason why I said it was cool is because regardless of the accountability, look at the roles associated with what the tasks are and how it's laid out from there. So you have the visionary, you have the person who gets stuff done, right? At this next level, the integrator, you have somebody who left to right shapes the product, builds the product, gets the leads, closes clients. And the next one down is who manages the money, who builds the teams, who keeps the customers, and who runs the systems. Man, some people were like, nah, accountability. Oh, calm down now. Because in BART, we would say, what are the boundaries, what are the roles, what are the authorities, and what are the tasks, right? BA, boundary, authority, roles, tasks. What's that look like? And there were some folks who were like, nah, man, that's racy, and that's and I was like, calm down. This is
very clear.
a way to think about how people do get stuff done.
Yes.
And it was kind of whack. What did you think, Adam?
I mean, I'm the one that brought it up, so now I'm showing my. I didn't really. I just noticed that my friends were talking about it. I knew. I did not. I didn't dig into it the way I could have, and I thought maybe we would save it for the show. Actually,
titles come last. I love it.
Yeah. So it was.
I mean, that kind of stuff. Like it's like the My Cousin Vinny episode where he only read the titles. He didn't read the articles. That's usually not me, but in this case, it was. But yeah, like it all seemed reasonable. I didn't know what was being reinvented or reframed. Maybe because I just, on first glance, it made sense.
So one of our friends said, if they have to look at an org chart to figure out who's responsible or accountable, they're in trouble. Oh, what happened to John? Oh, well.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. He's there. He's just off camera, which is cool. And I thought it was like, wow, it's not about that. My point was it was a way for people to understand. So if we step back from an org chart, which has a very paternalistic military, you do this, you do that, and you look at it very differently in terms of a non-Western, how about we just figure out, there are societies that aren't built on a militaristic go crush things. It's like, how do we make sure that we all can survive? Because that's the nature of organizations, is to come together to build something and survive long enough to do more of it. That's the task of any organization. Mm-hmm. But if you have this structure and you have to say, well, who's the racy part of it, which is what you're doing, trying to build out. I would argue in some ways, John, and I think you do this. I know your work. Like, what are we doing again? What are we trying to build again? Before we start assigning people to stuff, stop.
Stop for a minute.
Who's the person that's leading this, and who's the one to make sure the person who has this big, hairy idea can actually find the team to get this done?
Yep. Yeah. RACI chart. So for those who don't know, RACI, imagine that every function has someone who's accountable. That's the A. That's the one throat to choke. Responsible is who's actually going to do the work. C is consulted, who needs to be consulted, and then who needs to be informed. Consulted kind of implies more two-way communication, and informed is more one-way communication. So, but usually the most important ones are, and I won't even finish a conversation unless I have an A in each column. Like there's who is the accountable person, and then we can figure out who does the rest of the work. But if you don't have that, authority and responsibility and that role, then we're done here, because otherwise we're just going to swirl, and that's part of the challenge I'm going to be playing with this week.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, man. I love this conversation. It's interesting to me. I'd love to at some other point have a conversation about the connection between BART and RACI, and how in really practical terms, because I would submit to you that there are people who are going to be listening to us soon or in the future. They're going to say, well, I have a startup, or other people's like, well, I have an existing organization that we have entrepreneurs that we sit inside an organization. Somebody's told us to go and build something. We're like, but to say that you come along and say, yeah, if you sit inside and you're trying to do something innovative and entrepreneurial inside of an existing organization, federal government, national lab, something big, a couple of $1 billion worth of asset that they have to manage with some big, hairy, audacious goals. If you don't have this clear, that you can figure out these four and how they do this, you're in trouble to start. Love to have that conversation.
Maybe we can get this author back on and do that.
Which author?
The one who wrote this post.
The beginning one? Let's see.
Is this Matt Williams?
Whoever knows Matt. Tell Matt we want to have a chat with
him. All right, Matt. Come on, Matt. Let's go.
Matt, where you at, Matt? Let's go, dude. Matt Williamson.
But for tonight's conversation, let's talk about
we were doing something, huh?
Nice pivot. Nice pivot.
which came first, the hypothesis or the assumption. This is really good because Ty knows how my head works as a recovering engineer. That once I got introduced to this whole lean startup thing and how it's really just a scientific method, that really made a lot of sense as a fast framework to build things and get data when you're in areas of high uncertainty. And the goal is not to build, the goal is to learn as quickly as possible. So the way that we tend to do that is to turn assumptions into testable hypotheses. So Ty, what's an assumption?
Okay. When we teach this class, some of us are old enough to remember the original Bad News Bears with Word on Mouth Al. And he says, don't assume anything. You know what happens when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me. Oh, that's not the assumption we're talking about.
Close.
So
maybe an assumption is that thing that we have a best guess, literally assume that we're right? We don't have enough data. We don't even have a construct around which to build our assumption other than heartburn. And it's a kind of like, yeah, I know I'm right. No, you assume that you're right. The one thing that John and I used to do when we used to teach together is like, let's turn I thinks to I knows with data, right? The assume is, I love it. Did you do that while we were talking, or did you do that before?
I had it in the bag, man. I was ready for it.
He already knew where I was going. How do we turn I think to I know with data? And so the I think is the assumption. Like, I think this will work. No, you assume it'll work. Have you done anything to do that? Well, what they used to say, I used to be one of those.
Yes.
Yeah, and used to die, as my grandmother would say.
5 years ago, I did that. That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, like the world ain't changed in 5 years? Mm-hmm. Well, okay. Mm-hmm. So you're assuming the world hasn't changed. So you just go back. It becomes a kind of iterative conversation. So you assume that the world hasn't changed in 5 years, and you assume that the things you did 5 years ago would still apply. Cool. That's how I understand an assumption. Because it could make an ass out of you and me. Ooh, I had to go back to it.
Especially if you're wrong.
Boom. Yes.
You want to build on that, Adam?
I think I've just taught this that hypotheses are just assumptions with details.
See, that's why I wanted to talk about chicken and egg. Which came first?
Assumption.
So that's interesting. That's an interesting way to think about it, right? So another lens that I view assumptions through is like heuristics. There are things that we have to assume in the world. Otherwise, we're stuck in system 2 thinking, like the Dan Kahneman system 1, system 2. If we're always processing, we'll like burn out all our chemical energy, right? So we have to make assumptions about things in the world to survive, right? We have to assume that all the drivers on the road are bad drivers, so that way we can be on the defense and that kind of thing. We have to assume certain things about how we navigate the world. We have to assume that when we order food, it's going to be safe, right, from a restaurant, that kind of thing. Checks and balances, obviously, but if we didn't, we would just be constantly overloaded with data. And so that comes helpful when you are trying to do your normal everyday things, but when you're trying to navigate a startup or navigate something new or try something innovative, then all of your assumptions need to be put on the table again. And what was true in a different context may or may not be true in a different context. So the way that we would transform that is to, one, realize that we do make assumptions, or that we have these implicit assumptions that we need to get out of our head. And then two, turn those, like Adam was implying, into something we can actually test, something that we can actually verify and validate it is true or not, or invalidate in that case. And so some people would say, well, that's going to be time consuming, especially if I prove that I'm right. I would rather, find out that I'm wrong now than go on a false assumption. So that's part of that intellectual humility that comes with turning that assumption into something that can be tested. What are your thoughts on that?
So you got me thinking about this idea of a heuristic,
Mm-hmm.
and we used to teach this stuff to our executives. We had an executive course that John and I had built out where we talked about, I was trying to find it in my stuff, but we talked about the difference, the levels of going from this pipeline of data to heuristic to an algorithm. And data is just information. I think the assumptions that we have are all over the place. We're trying to make sense of all of this information that's hitting our eyeballs, it's coming in our ears, it's in our brain. We're trying to make sense of it. It's just data. And the heuristics are the gathering, like the liking of, this sounds like this and this kind of goes together. Heuristics are what allows humans to at least not bump into walls, metaphorical and sometimes physical, right? The heuristic of this thing that goes from where my feet are to this thing that's above my head, that's separated by something that's in front of me, that if I stick my arms out, I'm going to bump to it, is a wall. There's a heuristic associated with that, right? I may not know. As a matter of fact, here's one to prove it. You ever go into one of those mazes that have windows, and the kids run it, and it's funny. You see the kids, bam, and they have no information other than I can see. I know I entered, and I'm supposed to exit, and I have all of these columns, and I assume every time I touch one, I'm gathering more data, more pure data, because I don't have anything else. So I'm now creating these assumptions that every time I touch one of those blank things that's see-through, that's now a wall. If I don't, that means I can go forward. If I touch it, I don't. But I think that I'm now going forward, and because I did put my hands out, what do? I hit my head. Ow! And we laugh and like, oh, I guess I can't do that. So what do? I turn around and I go the other way, because now I've gone from that, boom, oop, that ain't it. Boom, that ain't it. Where am I supposed to go? Turn behind you. This is crazy, right? Funny video. So now they're collecting data to create a heuristic around what? Which way am I supposed to go? Right? I now know I have enough information. Oh, that's not the good information. And hey, oh, I think I'm getting there. Oh, bang, right? Daddy, help me. That's just wrong. That's just wrong as two. And what's really funny is he has 4 of them in his house. 4 little girls.
Running into the walls all day long.
Don't say no, bud, right? But they're collecting all this information. They're creating these heuristics that will allow them to create a pattern. What's a pattern? But an algorithm. And I think that what we're trying to figure out in our lean startup conversations is to go from a bunch of data. And I think, Adam, the work that you're doing around customer discovery is perfect. Just collect the data. Just stop assuming that you know everything, to create a heuristic, which is a pattern of, whenever this happens, this pain point jumps up, and now somebody's moving, and now we can develop an algorithm, which is a repeatable process, which is the purpose of a startup.
But it's interesting you say that, and I'll take the compliment. I take pride in some of that customer discovery work. It's been interesting to see we've talked about on the show confirmation bias and why going from good data to even interpretation is broken, and it's intentionally broken. So you don't, that fancy word you use for confirmation bias. What's that fancy word? Yeah, why people lie to themselves about it's the one you've been talking about the last couple of weeks. We'll roll the tape. We'll have another, but what John just talked about is why
it's all that damn brilliance in my head. I can't keep my ideas straight.
But we've been struggling to scientify why they won't even get to the data in the first place. And John, you sort of kind of broke down some glass walls there, and because they think it's wasteful. They think it is wasteful, and I already know this. There's cost. We see that there's cost associated with not validating and not even asking those questions. But it's interesting to think that, yes, if you went through questioning every last detail in the world, you'd get overloaded. So it's giving me a little bit more empathy on the.
Yeah.
I still think it's wrong. The context is wrong, but it's.
But you don't have to ask every question, because you're now starting to build heuristics around the questions that you're asking, right? You're looking for those patterns of that. That's why, that, what is it? The Nielsen rating. If you're trying to figure out one thing, 4 out of 5, and you get the same 4, ask 5 people, go to ask 5 people, and 4 of them say the same thing. Stop.
Yeah.
There's no more information available.
Yeah. And so you shouldn't be testing all your assumptions. Right. You should be at least prioritizing the most riskiest assumptions. Right. So that way you can actually see if buy down the risk of what's the riskiest assumption to your startup. Because that would be the best way to break that down, because there's some things that you're just gonna have to accept are assumptions.
So what would happen in that maze is that if is it UPS had done some work around it? If that maze, you only made right turns, you only went right.
Right. Yeah. UPS did that with their vehicles, right? Mm-hmm.
To figure out what is it? John? You're engineering the farmer's dilemma, like a delivery dilemma. There's
the traveling salesman dilemma.
The traveling salesman, right? The traveling salesman thing, right? If I'm only making right turns, even in that glass maze, if I'm only making right turns, take my right foot and turn right, eventually I'll figure out something. It may take me a little longer. Exactly. And I think what the problem that you're solving, Adam, and that John is agreeing with, is you don't have to do everything. But if you stick to your guns and say, I am going to own the right turn, and I don't need to go right. Well, let me take the next left, and then I'll turn around. No, figure out something and test it. Yeah. Okay, that didn't work. Great. Now I can figure out the next thing. Maybe I'll just make all left turns. Or every time I hit a bump, I'll just turn completely around and go 2 steps back. I don't know, something, right? But you're creating an experiment. I think the other part of the assumption is the experimentation, which is built on hypotheses, right?
Yep. So what's a hypothesis? Right. A hypothesis is, again, now rooted in the scientific method. And so it's one of my pet peeves now when someone says, I have this hypothesis. It better start with the word if and have a condition, and then carry on and say, then this other condition might happen, right? Cause and effect.
Love it.
Because if you don't have if then, you don't have a hypothesis. You have something else. You might have a guess. You might have another assumption. But now we're actually trying to shape it into something that's falsifiable, that's failable, and that we can actually run a test on.
Do me a favor, because I started undergrad as a chemistry major. I'm a nerd, and in my community we call them blurds, a black nerd, right? I was a blurred. I'm still a blurred. I'd rather watch Star Trek than anything else, because I think it's a common friend of ours would say, anything you see today in modern technology came out of Star Trek. Tricorders. What's a tricorder? The flip phone, right? It gets started there, right? That's a tricorder, right? And even in some ways, this is a tricorder because it can do health tech. But the thing that always confused me, not largely, but confused me, is this idea of falsifiability. Could you say more about that? Because I think for our startups, people who listen to this, it might help them really ground their hypotheses in a real way.
Yeah, I'll preface it by saying that modern software development in the past probably 40 years grew out of this thing called XP programming. And one thing that made it different than your traditional programming was you wrote the test first. Instead of what it does, you actually wrote the thing that tested it. And the second step was write the software so the test fails. So that way the test is functional. Because otherwise, if you ran the test and the software worked all the time, well then, again, why are you testing it in the first place? And the point there would be to get in the mindset of how can I ensure that I'm actually failing the test first, so that way I get that out of the way, and then I can start assembling working pieces later. Think of like testing every individual Lego brick that comes off the assembly line, right? You want to prove that the test is failable, so that way you know that as you start shoving Lego bricks into this test, that it's a good test.
You're testing the test.
Testing the test, exactly. So
you're making my head hurt.
So now we want to get to the point of, can we get in the mindset, forget software or anything you build now, should your assumptions be able to be proven false? So here's an example. If I said, hey, if I launch my website tomorrow, I will get visitors to my website. Right? That test is almost guaranteed to succeed every single time. There's no way that test can fail. Why? Because you're going to go check out your website, and the hit counter is going to go up by 1, right? And then you're going to send the email to your friends, and then 5 people are going to click on it, and like, look, my numbers are going up.
That is awesome.
I can't fail.
Oh my God.
Fail.
Yes.
Yeah. So what have you learned? Absolutely nothing. But if you now reshape that to say, well, what am I really trying to get to? I really want to make sure that I have customers that are actually coming in to pay something. Well, then I should rewrite that test so that I could actually be wrong, and I could like have data and do something about it, rather than just have a pretty chart of numbers going up. So I would rephrase that to say, well, if I launch my website and share it with 50 people, then 30 of them will come to the site within a week and will purchase something.
Whew.
So now I've turned just some random test into something that I could be wrong. And guess what? Writing that first number, that first criteria, is hard, because you're like, when you actually write it down and say, I might not get to that finish line, that's very level setting for the first time people to be wrong, to admit that they could be wrong. And so you launch the test, you launch the website, you send it out to 50 people, 10 people show up within a week. Guess what? Your test has failed. It doesn't mean there's bad data. It doesn't mean you didn't learn anything. But the thing that you were trying to get information about has failed in a quantifiable, measurable, you can't ignore it kind of way. What you do with it is up to you, right? I would hope that you would take that learning and run another experiment and do more conditions, right? Test fast, test early. But if you don't start with something that can fail, then you're just lying to yourself.
I don't know. I think the last 3 minutes you need to clip, and we need to put that up on LinkedIn, because that was they say in church, you spoke the word. You just delivered the word, right? Because
I get a witness.
That's right. Amen. So what you said was, and Adam, I'd love to hear your idea about what the impact would be in customer discovery, but because I think customer discovery is in and of itself an experiment, right? It is. I'm going out and I have thought I'm going to ask a question, even it's like, hi, can you tell me your name? Right? Can you tell me your name and why you would even talk to me? That's an experiment, right? In some ways. But I think that what you said and what could make the difference for a lot of people is, I think, Adam, you used the word confirmation bias. Even how you construct your test is to confirm, you create bias in the result. If I create this, then I'll get customers. Of course you will. Because as you said, every time I check, I now have one more customer, and it doesn't mean anything, which I think there's another part of this. Probably another is the vanity metrics show part of this is a whole nother issue. But
oh yeah,
but that dude, I've been with you a long time, and yeah, thank you.
It only took that long for you to get it. Got it.
Yeah.
All right, I'll bring this back to customer discovery in a second. The first thing that you said, which is just correct, it needs to be failable, right? Like, you need to have a number and a date, and even just people, like, and this will come from customer discovery, like even a specific type of individual will be usually to me, those strongest ones are if this person. It's not. Some of them are pure tech, but you usually have 2 out of 3 assumptions types within a hypothesis. Like, so I think you like if this tech, then this business model, or if this customer, or if this tech, then this user will do X. I think Eric's definition of MVP has changed now. Like the most recent one is testing multiple hypotheses at once. It's not just the quickest way through the build, measure, learn curve. It's the time when you're actually like, I forgot where, it might be in his most recent, we'll pull it up somewhere, but it was when it was either for a conference or something where there needed a new definition, and it wasn't just, the minimum amount that you could build for the maximum amount of learning or your fastest way through the build, measure, learn curve. It was when you were starting to test multiple assumptions at once. And forgive me if there's now been a new update since then. The falsifiable piece, the metrics, the not just like self-fulfilling prophecy kind of stuff, I mean, that's just table stakes. But when you were saying about like learning, like just because you're experimenting, you don't necessarily know why. And then a lot of times what ends up, you're changing things where you're changing things arbitrarily because it's not really learning that nobody came to your site is not a learning. It's more why, right? So that goes back. That's the original, I think, which I think led, like, yes, you want to talk to customers and you want to, but it's truly it's the most reliable way to get to why. There's some, on the tech side, you can find out why,
some functional thing
you
works.
can run an analysis, like, like thinking of like Mark Rober videos, like, it broke here. This was the point of failure. It broke because, I didn't account for the wind. I didn't account for the weight. It broke here. I'm going to reinforce this piece. So you can certainly learn. I don't know then if you're having a quantifiable hypothesis other than that this will fly. Like if I build this thing, it will fly for 20 seconds. Or I guess you do.
Yeah, sure. Because your hypotheses could be hypotheses of desirability, hypotheses of viability,
right.
and
That's
or feasibility. So yeah.
So
And the questions will be different, obviously. Yeah. Why did this tech thing break? Right. Engineers are really good at that, right? They could do root cause analysis, 5 whys, et cetera. Right. But
so, and I think, and this is what I kind of want, but I'm always pushing to put stuff on the screen. But whenever I would have this conversation, I would always put up the definition of the scientific method at first, because people listening are like, some of them are like, all right, this is super useful for structuring assumptions, hypotheses. How do I rank them? How do I test them? But it's like, now I'm thinking all good experiments, not only do they have to have those minimum, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound and falsifiability, but like you shouldn't really run an experiment where even running the experiment won't result in learning.
right.
Like you shouldn't be able to even run, like forget about testing the test. It shouldn't even be enough that, yes, of course, the vanity metrics of like just landing on your own site, of course, and we're not joking. Like people will do this. They will send it to 30 friends. They will get a press article that validated
Sure.
that the press will run a story about something that fits their news cycle, not necessarily that proves demand for your product. Yeah, it's almost like, so like we conflate this a little bit, like this observation piece, so it's not like what comes first, the assumption or the hypothesis, because in this case it is sort of but it's like, where does the assumption come from? Does it come from initial observation? Does it come from a little bit of research? Does it come from, a coach? It's like, because you have these,
A chicken, an egg.
it does come from a chicken, an omelet, and breaking. It's like we sort of have these assumptions that are implicit. Like if I build this product, people will use it, and it's like, well, why do you believe it? It's like, well, because I have this problem. Well, why do you, how? Because I'm going to get funding. And it's like, I'm going to get funding. Well, how are you going to get funding? Like, well, because people are going to invest. And it's like, there's a million different embedded implicit assumptions in this bigger assumption that founders tend to make all the time. So it's almost like you have to shatter.
Yes. So
it needs to be atomized. It needs to be.
yes,
It's not
so
so much
that's
prioritized. They need to be. It's 5 again. And this is going to sound obvious
yeah.
to some people.
Well, and so I'm glad you brought that up because one thing that Ty and I did well for a couple of workshops was question storming. Right, we had teams, do a couple, just get out of their head. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And they go for 5 minutes, and you'd see the sticky start to run out. And we get stuck, and we'd say, "Great, all right, now do 50 more." Like 50, what 50? Yes, 50 more.
Yeah.
Just well, how am I supposed to figure that out? Well, take this one and drill that one down, atomize it, like you said, break that down. Ask only 10 whys about this one and 10 whys about that one, and all of a sudden, once they cracked their skull open,
Yes.
then they started running again, and they were drilling down into some very specific things. To your point, because just like strategies, assumptions are nested.
That's deep. That's good. That's good. I'm sorry, Adam.
I think that's the biggest missing piece. Is assumptions are nested in, and you need that momentum. Like, yes, when we run workshops like this, it's second nature to us, but it's not. You got to give Steve Blank credit for getting out of the building. It's not until you get out of the building. It's that those first 5 experiments are not even learning about. Testing the test is learning how to learn. It's learning how to even recognize. Holy shit!
Right.
Like I'm 50 levels up on my assumption. Like I'm not even close. So that's the learning for those first 5 sprints, 3 sprints, 2 sprints at least is just on breaking down the assumptions.
Peeling. This is interesting because this is making sense why Ash would say, yeah, getting out of the building, yeah, I think it's overrated. Because you watch what he says. He writes like getting out of the building is somewhat overrated. And I think it's because it is somebody like Steve, it becomes second nature because he is Steve Blank. That is, he is supremely curious. Been to his house. He has a freaking library, several libraries worth of books in his house. He is extremely curious.
Are you saying he has many leather-bound books?
Well, I don't know about leather bound, but he has a lot of books, right? He has a lot of books, and he's extremely curious. So he's just reading. It's like, I don't know, because he'll say things. Does that make sense to you? Like if you talk to him, he'll say, he's like, does that make sense? What am I saying making sense? And I don't think he's being pedantic he's literally like, did anything that I say make sense to you in your exploration of trying to unpack this problem as I've repeated it back to you? I think that's how he thinks. I would suggest to you that what the 3 of us do naturally and what we can't get people to do naturally is when they get out of the building, you're not getting out of the building, ladies and gentlemen, to go and discover whether or not your thought is the right thought. You're literally getting out of the building like, I had a thought, and I'm just trying to figure out whether or not I'm even thinking about the right thing right now, because it could be, as far as I know, it's completely jacked up. That's what I think that he's asking people to do. I think that's the 3 things those are the things, not the 3 things, my apologies. I think that's what we do kind of naturally. John, and for those who are listening, he's not kidding when we said we would ask people to do a question storming. And by the way, that's not us. That came from the guy's name is Hal Gregensen. His book is called Questions Are the Answers. He does COOs and he does these things with like Fortune 50s. And he's like, I don't care what your answer is. I want to know if you're more curious about the question. The other guy that if you want to read a really good book is how Warren Berger's A More Beautiful Question. Another really good book about just thinking about just idea. That one, Questions Are the Answers. I mean, he has a great way of unpacking it. And for the design thinking folks, and it's the double diamond, right? It's the double diamond. It is, brainstorming is interesting. And that's the other one right there. Look at it. And even, you see that, John? That's A More Beautiful Question. They get all those. There's another book there. They get all these books together. That I think the problem with brainstorming is that it closes the aperture because you've already identified the problem and you're trying to figure out what's the solution.
Yes.
Question storming opens the aperture. Like, I made an observation and I don't know what the heck is going on.
Yeah, and I think this is one subtle dig at IDEO because they they have people, when they do question storming, they always lead with a closing question, which is how might we? And how might we is driving to a solution, where sometimes you need to step back before that and really start to break that apart and diverge before you converge. As they do.
On that note, like this idea of double divergence, I like not only sending the teams back to do 50 more, but if you go through in a structured environment, you don't always have the resources to do this, but if you're in a workshop which follows a pretty structured path, like you have people talking about the problem and the customers, and writing down some assumptions and writing down more assumptions. This specific piece, if you have two teams reporting, you make them rotate and question each, like exposing that blind spot, not answering the questions but asking more questions, and having other teams like the way a coach would, but having their peers who have both the benefit of being outside, so in a coach capacity, but also the benefit of being inside, sort of knowing the organization, knowing some of the policies, knowing the environment, knowing generally the customer, the company's mission. Like it is one of the most powerful things. And then because
Absolutely.
then you get people do get stuck, and David Bland coming next week. Like before you can really pick, they should all be critical and unknown. Like if they're unknown, they're not risky as some, and so it's like, it's almost like you need that first distillation. Everything should be in the upper right corner. And then from there, it's like, well, how much, like, not just like putting on a sticky note, but like, why do you think that? Why do you think we have evidence on that? Why did you put it that degree? Do we have primary evidence? Do we have secondary evidence? How recent is this evidence? Is it 5 years or is it last week? Did this team create that evidence or not? Why is it critical? You just put it up there, but like really just throwing away the entire matrix, just taking the upper right. But even that takes a breakthrough. And I think that breakthrough comes from number one, yes, getting out of the building, running those first couple experiments, but inside the building, getting teams without, the prisoner experiment and going, abusing their power over each other, but in the right scenario, getting the coaches to kind of create the framework, but then the teams are the exact right people to do that second layer of double divergence, I guess.
When we used to run a business model workshop that we called Fast Forward, early on.
I still have some.
Yeah, I got mine. Right. That what we used to do is to have the people would identify their problem they're working on wherever they were at inside the organization, the problem they were working on. Then they would work as a team and they would pick a problem at their table and work that problem, work the business model. And we would have them give up and do their business, if you've ever seen the business model canvas, you kind of walk through the story of the business model canvas. And then they would get, to your point, they would get feedback from the people who work inside the same organization, but not on that problem, would go, why did you do that? And we would say, you can't respond. You just have to take notes. You just have to take notes because you can't defend. You're just trying to get data and listen to what other people are curious about and what they don't understand. And we'd say to the people, you can't target the people. You have to look at the problem, understand what you don't understand about the model. And it was, to your point, Adam, it was amazing to see people kind of go back and do it and go, oh, we never thought about that thing. We now have a different way of looking at this. And in 2 days, there was teams coming out of there in 2 days that would go, we're taking this back to our organization because there's something we need to work on.
Yeah. Some of the stuff, admittedly, it just happens in workshop, but that I agree. That happens in real life. People, it changes their point of view. It gives them a bigger perspective, a bigger sort of footprint to experiment around.
Absolutely.
There's no question that works.
Because the world is only what you know from what you can see.
Yeah.
That's it.
Adam, let's bring it home and answer the question of the day. Which came first, the hypothesis or the assumption?
The assumption.
Great. Good luck at Rally this week.
See y'all there.
Ty. What came first? The hypothesis or the assumption?
I'm going to be contrarian and say the hypothesis because we're humans and we think we're right.
Ooh. Nice. What else? For me, yeah, I'm gonna say the assumption. I'm gonna say that we assume we get out there until we met our first saber-toothed tiger, and then we quickly got data and ran away. So that'll be
run away, run away, run away, run away, run away.
Well, this was great. I enjoyed it.
I did
really
too.
good conversation on a variety of topics, and
Yes.
the least of which is know what happens when you assume and turn into a fallible hypothesis. That. Thank you guys. See you next week.
All right.